Hey, how's it going? It's me, Lex, back at you once again with another tabletop video. Today is something that I've wanted to talk about for quite a while, and I've finally sort of found a good opportunity to talk about it. And sort of refined my thesis as I've gone. Today I want to talk about games and how they can support the things that you want to do and how that can shape the experiences that you have while playing them. So for a very long time, I was a big fan of Pathfinder. Pathfinder. Oh my god. There we go. Sorry, it's quite late. Pathfinder 2nd edition. And in large part, this was because I felt like it provided a lot of support to me. In general, what I find engaging and interesting about a system is I like when its mechanics are novel, and I like when they support me in accomplishing something unique. And usually that's what the system has set out to, allow you to accomplish. But recently, as in the past couple years, I'd say, I've been finding that I have a lot of issues with games not providing support for many things. I have a recent example. I was recently at a local event running some tabletop for charity, and one of the situations that I ran into was we were running Triangle Agency, and there was a investigation going on upstairs. The agents had split the party. 2 of them were upstairs searching for clues, and there were another 2 downstairs distracting the person who lived in that room from going up with their words. And I realized as we were playing out this situation that the game didn't really support me in any way. Every call that I made had to be entirely on me. When they were searching up here for what they found, I had to decide whether or not they found anything, how useful it was, how easy it was to access it, and then down here with the distraction, I had to also decide whether or not they could successfully do that. There was nothing guiding me, nothing helping me, nothing even prompting me to make, say, interesting decisions or choices about these outcomes. And so it ended up with me sort of just giving them what they wanted. There was no real super tension, at least as far as I was able to feel, because of the fact that, I want to tell the story, they want to tell the story. And everything was also very tiring, having to come up with everything on the spot. And in this way, I've sort of established a bit of a framework, something that you all might have heard one time or another, is the phrase something along the lines of like, Pathfinder is a combat game. This is a statement I want to be right up front that I agree with, but I'll explain exactly why I agree with it. The reason that I view Pathfinder and, if we want to get into the more popular games, D&D, as a combat game is because that's what the mechanics are focused on. When you're making a character in Pathfinder, many of your choices are only going to matter in a combat situation. What choice of weapon you have, your proficiency with it, your AC, many of your stats are influencing save DCs and HP. Many spells are sort of exclusively the domain of dealing damage. And that isn't to say that a GM can't, rule that certain things do work. For example, I was doing a playthrough where some players were traveling recently, and they came upon a gigantic mudslide, and I allowed them to use a I forget the exact spell, but it was a cone of water that dealt some bludgeoning damage. I allowed them to use it to clear that mudslide because I thought that was exciting. But that was something that came about purely from me. It isn't something that the game exactly allows. And I've found as well, Pathfinder having its D20 system where, the 4 degrees of success add a lot of interesting... I don't know what I've done trying to make a D20 here. That's fine. The 4 degrees of success system has done a lot of work in making roles exciting and engaging in combat. It means that your bonuses are more likely to count for something, even if a lot of the time it's just in reducing the chance of a critical failure, which, if you're taking the action, doesn't matter much of the time. The concept is still very sound. It adds a lot more engagement when everything isn't just binary pass-fail. But what I've been finding is that even though it's not binary, it still doesn't lead to interesting outcomes. Oh, that's not an arrow. It still doesn't lead to interesting outcomes. And so what I've found is that this sort of naturally creates a gameplay pattern with Pathfinder and games similar to it. Honestly, a lot of games that I've read and played over the years, where being the game master can feel very much like there's the part of the game that all of the mechanics point towards, combat, and that's what the players are excited about. That's what they want to get to. That's what they want to engage with. People have made characters with all these spells, all these combat feats, all these stats and armor, and they're excited to describe their cool moves. And then they get to combat, they have a great time. All of the GMing advice in the book will point you towards making combats that are supposed to feel challenging, but aren't in actuality all that difficult to overcome. And it leads to me personally in some of my growing distance from specifically Pathfinder as a game, feeling very much like the game is encouraging me to create fun little arenas that the players have fun in, and then connect the players to the next fun little combat arena as quickly as possible by just making stuff up. And again, I want to reiterate, this isn't that the game doesn't have anything to try and pad over these spaces, or that these spaces aren't inherently valuable on their own. I'm talking purely on a design level. Because failing a check in Pathfinder is just failing to do something, and because most of the player options and mechanics in the game are only really usable while you're in a combat situation, it leads to a lot of the GM having to come up with things between the combats, and then combats playing out very much as designed, one might say. So, with all that sort of established, now the way up front, I want to move into Powered by the Apocalypse. This is a genre of TTRPG that I've known about for years. I have always very much struggled to get into it. I have been quoted as saying that I feel like Powered by the Apocalypse is just sort of lightly guided make-believe. In some circumstances, I felt like it was barely even a game. But I kept trying because I have always wanted to understand what appeals to people about the genre. I feel that everything, if people are enjoying it, there has to be something valuable to it. And it must just be my difficulty that I haven't been able to engage with it. And lo and behold, I finally did crack that barrier, and I feel like I understand Powered by the Apocalypse now. And I kind of love it. I'm going to go into breaking down some components, specifically in its main resolution component, that make it work so well for me. But specifically, I want to take on the framework of what are the mechanics supporting you doing as the game master. In Pathfinder 2nd Edition, when an NPC is withholding information, but it's something that the players want to get, you're sort of left with, well, do I just resolve it in freeform play? Do I just have them roll a diplomacy check? If they succeed, they get it, but if they fail, they just fail? What exactly do I do here? And so I want to sort of hone in on how games can support you in these regards. I'm going to be moving upwards. I have a collection of moves from Stonetop. It's a Powered by the Apocalypse game that is coming out right around the release of this video. I think a little before, a little after, something like that. I don't have the exact window pinned down because it doesn't matter. It is set in the Iron Age, and the whole pitch of it is that it's fantasy, but it's centered around your village and your community and your relationship to other people. And a lot of its moves are very good at encouraging that sort of playstyle. But let's start basic. So the format of a Powered by the Apocalypse move, if you're unaware, is sort of moving the fiction forward collaboratively. The idea is that rather than taking an action, I'll lie, or I'll attempt to persuade, and then rolling a die and getting a result, play takes place in just a pure conversation. It starts out as just going back and forth between the GM and the players over and over again, as you do whenever, you're establishing something, or usually an exploration. We're all pretty familiar with this. And what Powered by the Apocalypse does is, as people are, making their way through a cave, hearing various noises, seeing trickling water, whatever, exploring stuff, eventually they come to a moment of great tension right here, where something is going to happen. You as the GM are going to have to decide whether a threat comes along, whether someone gets in trouble, what have you. Maybe someone is trying to jump across a gap. Maybe someone is trying to swim down a river to catch something, etc. Powered by the Apocalypse figures, well, all of this is pretty intuitive and pretty fun, so we're not going to bother with messing with how you establish things and have the back and forth. People are just doing things, If you want to raise your torch and look at a wall, you can raise your torch and look at a wall. But once you try to jump that gap, once you try to swim down that stream, once you try to get through a door before it slams shut, we're going to insert a move. A move is triggered when a fictional circumstance is met. So Defy Danger is the basic move in Stonetop. When danger looms, the stakes are high, and you do something chancy. Check if another move applies. This is the generic move, so it pushes you to more specific ones if they exist. But otherwise, you choose the stat you are going to roll with. And so this will depend on what you're doing. If you're, trying to catch that closing door, that might be dexterity because that's speed. Whereas if you're trying to jump over a pit, that might be taking more of like your physical strength, your ability to leap. Whereas maybe charisma, defying danger, would be something like someone's very mad at you. You come home from an expedition and you've lost their child who was entrusted as your ward, and defying danger to not make things worse when you're talking to them. Either way, this move is triggered, and then you follow the results within it, and the players will roll 2d6, which gives you that bell curve distribution where it's more likely to tend towards the middle and less likely to tend towards the outsides. Plus your stat. So I can actually bring up real quick here my code. I have some dice rollers I've been working on. But I have down here the +0. The chance you get a 7 is about 60%, and then a +1 bumps that up to 72, +2 to 80, and so on. So bonuses are quite strong in these systems. They bump up your expected result quite a lot. But then after you make that roll, it will push you down to an outcome. And these outcomes are what I'm talking about. They are giving the GM support in whatever the players are trying to do. So in this case, on a 10 or higher, you pull it off as well as one could hope. You know, if you're defying danger against something that's truly inescapable, then maybe you still take some damage or still suffer some issues, but it's as good as it could be. On a 7 and 9, you can do it, but the GM presents a lesser success, a cost or a consequence, and maybe a choice between them or a chance to back down. So, you know, you leap across, but maybe you drop something, or if they wanted to drag it into more of like a danger type situation, maybe you leap across and then sort of scuffle and fall off and like catch a rope or something, and you might have to do it again, or someone else might have to help you, or a consequence. So maybe you jump across and then something's coming up behind the party, and everyone and everyone else has to jump across as well. It's guiding the GM directly towards incorporating something, and because there's no room left for just nothing happens, it means that the story is going to be moving forward constantly. Now, this isn't to say that you as the GM are going to immediately come up with something amazing, but it means that after a couple of seconds of thought, you're going to come up with something exciting and interesting, and you don't have to weave it wholesale out of the game. And so, at this point, now the move either rockets you up into more tension on some of these lower results, or drops you back down as you succeed and you can continue from that baseline. And then the final tier, which isn't actually talked about here, is the 6 or less result. Unless otherwise specified, a 6 or less is that the player gets XP. So progression is defined by when you fail, which I think is very exciting. It's nice as like a reward system for the players where they get to feel good in a moment of something bad happening. And so that also sort of makes them a little excited. But then the GM just has something bad happen. So in the case of jumping across the pit, that could be that you don't make it across the pit, or it could be you do, and as you sort of stumble onto land, the ground crumbles out from under you, widening the pit even more. There's no way back, or your party won't be able to join you, or it could be that there's something on the other side. It pushes you towards, again, exciting, interesting outcomes. And I didn't actually have these copied into this file here to show off, but the game does have, I can actually bring out, I have some physical cards that I made for referencing. The game does have GM moves, which you can reference if you ever feel lost on some of these. Like, someone rolls a 6 or less, and you're like, well, what could I do? So the GM moves, just the base ones, I'm gonna list some of the more interesting ones. There's Announce Trouble. There we go. Which is all about, you know, something bad is gonna happen. That could be you hear a growl out of the darkness after you land. Or put someone in a spot. In a spot. spot, which could be the aforementioned example of missing the jump but catching on a vine or something. You've been put in a spot, something dangerous is happening. Or there's, of course, stuff like separates them, which would be, maybe the ground crumbling underneath, you're separated from your party, and you can combine these moves as well for exciting stuff. So I out of the gate, I love that this is providing immediate supports to all sorts of outcomes. I love that it's weighted towards specific things, so when players aren't very skilled at something, they're very likely to either have something bad happen or succeed, but it's with some sort of interesting occurrence happening. And this is the basic design, as far as I've been able to tell, of Powered by the Apocalypse, is things will follow this sort of pattern, where a 10 or higher will be as good as it could be, a 7 to 9 will be you succeed at what you're trying to do, but something bad also happens, and a 6 or less will just be bad happens. And again, I just love being able to mark XP whenever you fail. I think that creates a really interesting dynamic where players want to try things and want to fail. But all this put together, the design of these moves is pushing the story forwards and supporting the GM in creating interesting outcomes to situations. It's guiding them. And now I want to move on to the next bit, which is when a move is designed in a way that defines a particular outcome. And what I mean by that is when a 10 or higher doesn't accept you from some consequence. So for example, here in Stonetop, we have Clash. When you fight in melee or close quarters, roll strength. On a 10 or higher, your maneuver works as expected and you deal damage. And pick one. You can either avoid taking damage, or you can strike hard and fast for additional damage. On a 7 to 9, your maneuver works mostly, and you deal your damage, but you suffer your enemy's attack. And 6 or less as normal. And so what this creates, and in this case it's not so absolute because it does offer you the choice to avoid, but what you can see here is the concept of the move has been designed in such a way where getting into close quarters combat almost without fail will result in you getting injured. And I think that that's really interesting as well as a way to sort of shape how certain parts of the game, certain components, when people do them, can have inevitable outcomes. That's an interesting sort of design tool in making your moves that I find very exciting. Not too much to really dig into there. Next up, this is going to be talking about improvisational support. So I was talking before about that upstairs situation with the investigators and they're distracting the resident downstairs with my lovely doodles, and how I just had to decide what they found, and I had to decide if they were able to distract her for long enough. Whereas with Stonetop, I probably would have just had the upstairs folk roll Seek Insight. When you study a situation or person, so in this case the situation being the room, looking to the GM for insight, roll Wisdom. On a 10 or higher, ask the GM 3 questions from the list below. On a 7 to 9, ask 1. Either way, take advantage on your next move to act on the answers. What happened here recently? What's about to happen? What should I be on the lookout for? What here is useful or valuable to me, which is probably the one they go for. Who or what is really in control here, and what here is not what it appears to be. And so, assuming they rolled Seek Insight, they got a 7 or 9, then they'd ask what here is useful or valuable to me, and I could give them the diary that I ended up just sort of coming up with was there. When I was running Triangle Agency, And then on a 6 or less, I would have simply had her stop being distracted downstairs and come up and see them in her room. And with this one move, I've sort of handled this entire 4-character split party situation during an investigation, and I haven't had to come up with anything all too difficult on my own. I had to come up with something useful or valuable, but I'm already guided to that because of the fiction, why they're here. They're here to investigate this girl and her connection to a murder. So something useful or valuable would of course be some piece of information or evidence, if that were the case. And so I just wanted to give that example of how these moves can benefit specific situations that in other games I have to weave wholesale. It's the same thing in Pathfinder 2nd edition. I don't know if you've ever had this situation where a party member gets attacked and they don't have a weapon, and they ask if there's anything that they could use around, and you just have to come up with it. Well, with Seek Insight, that would be their move. They would roll wisdom and ask what there is useful or valuable to them, and that would give them a weapon of some kind, fitting the situation, of course. Maybe it's a loose brick, maybe, and this is the example actually used in the book, it's like a mop handle as an improvised staff, something like that. Moves can support you in all aspects of the game, rather than having to be really honed in on one particular thing, like the strike action in Pathfinder being just for attacks. Then if I hop on up to my next example, I want to talk about the collaborative storytelling aspect of things with these two particular moves. So Stonetop's Persuade move versus NPCs and versus PCs are two different moves. For NPCs, when you press or entice them, say what you want them to do or not do. If they have reason to resist, because if they don't, they just agree. Roll charisma. On a 10 or higher, they either do as you want or reveal the easiest way to convince them. On a 7 and 9, they reveal something you can do to convince them that'll likely be costly, tricky, or distasteful. So this is creating the whole concept of if you can convince someone, then we're going to actually introduce that interestingly. It's not just roll diplomacy and suddenly they'll do what you want. It's you can figure out how to convince them. And then if you fulfill that, they agree. And then on a 6 or less, they might not want to do it for you, or maybe the cost of it is just really high, or maybe you get interrupted, all sorts of things. And I also wanted to, as a very brief aside, say that I am intending in a game that I'm running pretty soon for Stonetop to use Persuade, sort of like a soft version of it, rather than triggering the move itself, having people roll. I'm intending to use it as a sort of bit of flavor, where, for example, maybe the PCs come to someone and ask, oh, hey, can you help us with this trip out into the forest? We need someone who's good with getting around. We know you're a trapper, whatever. And I want this person to agree. They're going to help, but I'm still going to incorporate Persuade as just a piece of the setting and bringing things together by having them ask for some extremely minor thing first. Like, oh yeah, but can you grab me a bucket of water from the stream first? Something like that, just to ground the world. But when we move into collaborative storytelling as a framing for this, it's very exciting because the players define what they want out of the situation. So there's no ambiguity. And then on a success, they know the easiest way to convince them, which means that they can fulfill that goal within the fiction rather than just sort of skipping over it like with a successful diplomacy roll convincing someone. And then if we view the PC version of this action, when you press or entice a PC and they resist, ask their player, could I possibly get you to do this? If they say no, let it drop. So we of course have the ability for players to hold on to what their characters would or wouldn't agree to. But if they say yes, you roll charisma, and they mark XP if they do what they want. If they don't, they need to tell you how you could convince them. And so the concept here is that not only are the stakes agreed to, and then the roll made, it's that if they do agree to what you want them to do, and these might be things that your characters are genuinely at odds about within the fiction, they're still tempted by the fact that there's XP, so there's that collaborative aspect. It doesn't just need to be the fact that they want to make the story interesting. It's also that they get a material benefit for doing so. But then, secondarily, because this exists, there's a sort of incentive the other direction as well. If I make characters that get into disagreements more often and get persuaded, then I'll get more XP. So there's a sort of collaborative element both directions when you're actually making a persuasion roll, as well as when you're making characters and having them interact with each other. You want there to be disagreements and you want them to resolve interestingly. And I just think that that's incredible. Moving up, another format of moves that I quite appreciate. This is Bolster. It's an example of both holding a resource for moves and a move not requiring any roll, which so far is not something that we've actually had. Bolster, when you prepare for what's coming or seek the favor of the gods, say how and answer the GM's questions. The GM has questions like, how are you doing this? What goes undone because you're doing it, etc. Then you hold preparation based on the amount of time you devote. So you can get 1, 2, or 3 preparation depending on how long you dedicate yourself to it. And when you make any roll to which your efforts might apply, you may spend 1 preparation to add +1 to that roll after it is made. And like I pointed out with my coding before, a +1 is pretty significant in this, so it's definitely something that players are going to want to aim for. But what I specifically love here is the concept of sort of, it's entirely grounded in the narrative. There's no roll here. It's just you describe that you're preparing, how you're preparing, and then you get 1 to 3 +1 bonuses that apply whenever your efforts would apply. The GM has to adjudicate this, but because they've had those questions established up front beforehand, it's not the type of thing that's going to be difficult to do, because it's supported. That's the big thing that I want to keep honing in on as sort of my thesis for this video, is that these options are supported. The GM asks you your questions, they know what it is you're actually doing. It doesn't have to be woven up wholesale or just arbitrarily ruled. Next up, I want to talk about on a 6 or less. As you know, the normal result is something bad happens and the player just gets XP. But I also find it interesting how, just like you can have the 10+ effect, still incur some negative penalty to sort of hammer down into something being incredibly contingent on an outcome, like getting into violence always results in getting hurt, would be the thesis with Clash. You can have a 6 or less not count as a failure to very interesting result as well, and this particularly works with magic items, I feel. Stonetop does this very well. I have this example here. This is from one of the examples in the book. If you would like spoilers, skip ahead to the next section right now. But Mindwalking. When you use the ice sphere as a psychic anchor, your consciousness leaves your body and walks the world as a spirit, invisible and insubstantial. So this already within the text of triggering the move is allowing you to do this. This is a power that you've unlocked. And then when you do it, you roll int. And on a 10 or higher, you hold 3 power. On a 7 to 9, you hold 2. On a 6 or less, you hold 2 and mark a consequence. And then you can spend that power to do various things. But the thing that I find really engaging here is that the fact that you still succeed, even on a 6 or less, you just mark consequence, means that this power is still extremely potent. And it encourages you to use it. It makes you feel like it's reliable and like it's incredibly strong and mystical, because it's one of these few things that on a 6 or less is still doing what you want. And then, as I mentioned before, being able to establish in the trigger of a move that it's something that people are capable of doing is just very cool. And then last but not least, for different types of moves that I love, are moves that are essentially just procedure. There's no role coming into play here, and it's not even necessarily the sort of thing like with Bolster, where a player is doing something just for themselves and the GM is still like setting goals for them or what have you. This is chart a course. When you wish to travel to a distant place, name or describe your destination. If the route is unclear, tell the GM how you intend to reach it. The GM will then tell you what's required, the risks, and how long it will likely take. And then when you set out on the journey, the GM presents each of the challenges one at a time, plus any surprises you couldn't have seen coming, in whatever order makes the most sense. Address them all and reach your destination. And then it has this list of example questions that the GM can present. And then an example over here of what this looks like. And the thing that I love about this is that it's making what would normally be something that a GM would prep or at the very least handle behind the screen into a collaborative process. When the players want to go somewhere, they say where they want to go. If it's hard to get there, they describe how they want to get there. And then the GM comes up with this list of requirements for them that everyone can talk about. So one of the examples in the book includes the GM says that getting lost is a risk, but the player brings up that they're just following a cliff, so there shouldn't be any real chance of getting lost. They're not like heading off anywhere where there are no landmarks or anything. And the GM takes it off. And then right away, as soon as you've finished making this move and putting this list together, you already have prep for your GM. The players know what to expect. They have all of these different things. We need to travel to Marsh Edge, which we'll have to wait until summer or bring warm clothes. It'll take at least 8 days, so that many supplies, and you need to watch out for the Noscalau. And then once you're at Marsh Edge, it takes 4 more days and supplies again. You need a knowledgeable guide. The way is perilous and plagued with danger. The terrain is treacherous and you risk injury, and it's grueling and you risk exhaustion. And the GM, just to run this, has to tick each of these off as they go. And maybe introduce some additional threats, definitely introduce some legs of the journey between these challenges to sort of make it feel like real travel and immerse the players in the world, describe what they're seeing. But all in one move, you've essentially shifted the balance of dynamic and like enjoyment from the GM making this thing completely by themselves that the players are then just gonna check off into collaboratively building it and engaging with it. And I just think that that's really exciting. So, yeah. I think that's about all I got in me. I have been absolutely loving reading Stonetop. I am in a play-by-post game of it currently, and I'm going to be running an in-person game starting in 5 days? Yeah, 5 days. And I could not be more excited. Having a game that's actually supporting me in the things that I want to be doing, instead of only supporting me in particular ways that in many times can make me feel like I'm more of an entertainment dispenser for players, is something that I'm very excited about. And not to mention the setting is incredible. If you haven't already seen it, go ahead and watch Quinn's Quest's review on Stonetop. I was more sold on it by a friend's recommendation, but after having watched the video, after reading the book, I do think that it's a very good video for getting you interested in the game. He does a great job explaining various aspects of Stonetop. In particular, its magic items. It's worth the wait. Anyways, thank you all for watching. It has been a blast. Ooh, put my little... Oh yeah. Thank you all for watching. It has been a blast making a video again for you. And I will see you next time. See ya. See ya. Leave a like if you liked the video, subscribe if you would like to see more, and check out any of my other stuff down below if it interests you.